Welcome back. I hope you've been well. It is a miserable day today, but we've got to get it to work somehow. So let's roll. Okay, so not much happening in the news today. Still wranglings over Greece and who's going to pay what. It's pretty pointless studying the news because it's just like these politicians walking around, talking in little rooms, trying to get a bit of this, trying to get a bit of that. I've got this feeling now that Greece is probably just going to come back with an agreement now. I don't know. I think I've flipped a bit. I guess they really just wanted to play a bit of chicken at the first with putting forth a referendum saying we're going to get out of the Eurozone. Harsh reality of a lot of things was falling down on them, and I think it was a pretty much an impossible sort of task for any political party to all of a sudden decide to reintroduce a new drachma, have rampant hyperinflation, and then stave off all your riots with a police force which you cannot afford, and then you've got the potential of your generals and stuff like that staging coups because you've got a history of that happening. I think I guess everybody makes that choice. Everyone has to go for the easy option. I don't know, maybe something inside me just says maybe they should have just gone for the pain now rather than the pain later. But I guess this sort of in the news, how the news will dictate this one. They'll just say this is a victory. This is everyone's going to be good now. Everyone's away from trouble, and we've managed to avoid a massive catastrophe. Yeah, I would say that we've just sort of put off a catastrophe. Just we're putting it away for ourselves for a little bit later, and then it'll be reintroduced at some point, and we're gonna have great fun. Okay, so on the weekend I was uploading the podcasts and trying to get all the sit-ups done and everything like that. That was a task and a half, and it did make me realise how incredibly poor I sounded. I do apologise. Again, I will try and improve my skill. I think the content, again, is a key factor of just trying to introduce new stuff. And yeah, I can only apologise. And I guess, if anything, that gives you a little bit of inspiration of anybody can do this. You can start from any sort of position and just talk your mind and just start from somewhere and then just build up from that point. I mean, I've achieved pretty much zero so far, so if I get anywhere in the future, then this is just sort of a little marker for you, just to say, okay, well, this guy, pretty dreadful. So if he can do it, I might as well do it. So, and it's not just podcasting, you can do anything, achieve anything you'd like. So, going back to the podcast, I would like to just bring up the subject of addiction. So I guess Greece is a good little sort of tie-up as well with addiction. So if you see Greece, they have an addiction of themselves. So they've got an addiction to debt expansion, or let's not just say Greece or just Greece, the people, but the actual the administrations that have been in power. they've had an addiction to debt. So they've basically been promising too much to their voters, and the only way that they can provide or keep up with those promises is they accumulate more debt. So they won't turn around and say, hey, we've got an addiction to credit or debt, whatever way you want to look at it, and we've got to go through the pain. We've got to go cold turkey, and we've got to start again from scratch, and we've got to realise that we're getting too self-absorbed in producing very little and getting too much. Mathematically, that cannot continue, and what we're doing now is having to put a stop to all of that. So, yeah. Did it really happen? No chance. And I think with a lot of addictions, the major thing here is people want to avoid negative consequences. People want to just go, okay, the feeling of something bad is just so incredible that I can't sort of keep away from this good feeling, so I need to maintain this good feeling. Now that the good feeling is just becomes pretty average after a while, but it's the avoidance of the negative feeling, which is it's always quite an interesting sort of perspective, because you do sort of characterize sort of like that person who's just trying to get the high, trying to get that really sort of that great feeling. But I think that the addiction sort of diminishes, and it's just to normalize oneself after a while. Yeah, I guess with certain drugs, there's an element of boredom and excitement which goes on, where you're sort of you're sitting in a room, you're just getting a bit bored, you're thinking, okay, what can we do this weekend? Hey, I know. Let's just go for something very simple. Let's get on the beers. Let's call the mates and let's go out for a party. And that fills that little void. You get a little bit excited by those things, and you're on your way to satisfying that drug addiction. So I just want to, so let's go back to the beginning. Why would this addiction happen? Why would we have this addiction sort of element to us? And I'd like to sort of put out the fact that obviously everyone is programmed. I think every living animal on this planet is programmed with these two commands, which is survive and reproduce. So surviving and reproducing is imperative to us being here, as if one or the other did not exist, then we would cease to exist in itself. So you then have to ask the reason why. Okay, so you got these like single cell structures, you got these like animals. Some of them just choose not to survive. The ones that just sort of lay back and just go, okay, I can't do it anymore, they disappear. So something happens in an evolution sort of cycle, which makes us think, okay, you need to survive, you need to sort of get this food. So you have these programs in you called hunger, and the hunger is just unavoidable. I think it's one of the worst pains that people say that you can go under, is when they talk to people in concentration camps, they say the hunger is the most painful feeling that you could ever have, and it's just one of our pure drives. And obviously hunger ties up very closely to a food addiction. And then you have reproduce, which is obviously our sexual desire. So our sexual desire, especially in our most fertile years, reaches its peak, and we can't get enough of it. And the sexual desire is very in tune to sort of those mechanisms. Now, what we have is obviously that's again sex addiction. I guess like that again. That's quoted as sort of an addictive personality trait to have, and I think they're your two key fundamental makeups of what you are. And there's no avoiding it. I mean, unless sort of you have certain birth defects, there's literally just no avoiding either two of those items. So we are programmed to have addictive traits to us, and it's baked into the fact that we have to survive and reproduce. Not to say that obviously addiction is like a fantastic thing and we should sort of embrace it and let's all go out and get fucked tonight, but in a sense of we know it's there and we just need to know how to manage it. So yeah, there's some interesting contrasts with that sort of subject. So some people manage their weight so that they can attain peak sexual desirability and sustain themselves in one area in comparison to the other. So people just sort of restrain one or use a discipline to restrain one addiction to attain the other. So then obviously there's you could possibly say the other contrast where people give up the sexual desirability to eat plenty of food and feel satisfied in that extent as well. So you do have those sort of flip coins which go on between certain addictions. And it still sort of remains where the peak person who's managing all of his addictions is the married man who can maintain his body weight, don't get the beer gut, and be faithful to his wife and all those things. That is, well, and obviously the opposite for a woman as well, but that is the sort of the peak level of somebody that could display all those disciplines, and hopefully not get the other drugs inside as well. So I just mentioned obviously the sexual and the hunger addictive sort of qualities, but then we also have drugs out there which also kick in and they hijack the brain centers which require that as well. So probably one of the sort of most akin to the sexual desirability thing, the one that triggers in the dopamines and all those kind of things, is more so would be your crack cocaines and your meths and stuff like that. That sort of reaches the reproducing aspect of our survival by kicking into those brain centers and giving the same release, well, a synthetic release, but it's obviously it's kicking in a massive scale version of that. And I guess a lot of other drugs are obviously just kicking into those brain receptors. Now there are certain drugs out there which are non-mentally and physically addictive, but they give us a different kind of stimuli, and just obviously giving us hallucinogens and things like that, which I guess there isn't sort of, I guess there's a drive for certain imagination and creativity and things like that, but it's not necessarily baked into the fundamentals. But it obviously just gives us it gives you everything a very interesting twist on things. So one thing with drugs, which I just mentioned a little bit earlier, is that, and this is I think this is a very interesting area, is that when you start doing a drug, the high is fantastic. You go, oh yeah, this is amazing. I want to do this. I want to be like this forever. But then there is a tolerance that is built. So for you to require the same kick and high as what you did before, rather than you using just once, you need to use it twice. And then, but that, even once you use twice amount, it wasn't quite as good as the first. Maybe sometimes with drugs, you're not relaxed for the first time, so it's maybe like after the third time that you try it, you've reached that peak high. But even so, it's usually you have that high and it was amazing, and you're trying to, like, sometimes you're just trying to recreate that high. That high was so good in the past, it's never quite there. Then you're going, okay, well, that high was all right. I've got to accept that my tolerance levels have gone up a little bit, but I'll just make do with that high, and it's never going to be quite the same, but I'll achieve those things again. And so this is, as like media will portray it and stuff like that, that the addiction is sort of a dangerous thing. People are just going out there getting high and all those kind of things and stuff like that. But nobody mentions it when somebody is addicted to programming computers, or somebody is addicted to engineering, or addicted to science. When we apply ourselves on areas which are which benefit others, nobody really bats an eyelid. Nobody says, okay, well, to the scientist, hey man, you're not making many friends. You're producing so many things which are amazing. You're studying things. We've found out a lot from what you've created there. But hey, what about your friends? What about your life? You're sort of forgetting all those kind of things, and you're putting that first. So there is the compulsive engagement with rewarding stimuli of the science, which is pretty much, yeah, that's the definition of addiction. Yeah, nobody questions that. And I guess that comes back round to why we're here and why we've got all these fancy cars and why we live in these houses and stuff like that, is that we have in ourselves this drive to survive and to get to the peak level of sexual desirability and all those kind of things. So for us to attain those items, we strive to improve things, and we try to create things to attain those two individual items. Now, it leads us to a place where sometimes it could go to materialism, which doesn't necessarily gain us anything in the realms of sort of true happiness. So we're walking around with all this fancy jewelry, but it doesn't really do anything for us. But on some ways, it does improve our lives, where we now have saved a lot of time where we're trying to hunt and gather food sources. We don't really need to do that now. We just need to walk down to the supermarket and grab our milk and eggs and a loaf of bread, and we're done. So it's enabled us, those two drivers, to sort of have excess capacity. And with all that excess capacity, we've got this time to think. And that time to think now is created like us with our thinking souls, and we're like, okay, well, now we've got... when I say thinking souls, I mean thinking minds, which let us ponder on things and think of the world in as a whole. And there's nothing better than driving past a massive lorry, spraying out loads of water underneath your car. Yeah, that is the driver of human essence. And the question is, where does that take us? Because we're, over time, I guess in the Western world, we are finding ourselves with more excesses of time. I know, obviously, some work is the work is demanding us to, as the economy crashes. Obviously, we're being pushed harder and harder to work more hours to keep our jobs and all those kind of things. But in essence, when we are... Sorry about that. When we're improving... I've totally lost my trail of thoughts. We are... Yeah, striving to a purpose, which is sort of unknown. We're pushing ourselves harder and harder and harder, and we're not sure where it's going to end us up. But I believe we're going to get to some kind of realization or goal. We're going to have endless capacity. Sorry, yeah, I was talking about the capacity side of things. So we should, as obviously, as long as we don't get the sort of the economic disasters which continuously occur and things start crashing down and we have to work excess amount of hours and all those kind of things, we should really be having so many labor-saving devices, tools, the internet. And the internet is obviously just one area where it should just expand and expand. I think obviously we're just still scratching the surface of the internet. If you think of how other technology has been sort of introduced, we're only scratching the surface of what is possible, and because everything is possible in a virtual manner, we have the capacity of endless of everything, really, once we exercise those kind of things. But yeah, our addiction, as much as addiction is demonized, if used in the right sense, to improve ourselves, then we have amazing potential. Sorry about that. I'm just trying to manage a couple of things at the same time. Just a couple of little footnotes that I have is one of the things is addiction. Everyone like says, "Okay, yeah, I don't suffer from an addiction. I don't know what you're talking about. I never. I don't see why people are doing smack on the weekend. It's a disgusting habit. I can't see how people can just sort of pour themselves down to those low levels and that kind of stuff. Yet they'll quite happily tuck into a few biscuits and have a few beers, watch some porn, you have a coffee in the morning, you name it. The addictive sort of things are all surrounding us, and we consume them all the time. And I think, obviously, one of the essences of success is just to sort of manage those areas where you can sort of just say, okay, well, I'm going to try and sort of put that in the back of my mind, and I need to pursue this thing. So if you're trying to pursue your best physical self, you need to put down the biscuits, and you need to get to the gym and push yourself harder and harder and harder to reach that goal. So mastering addictions is obviously one of the tricks of life, and once you can master your addictions, then you do have the potential to achieve endless possibilities. Now, once you refocus that addiction to something a little bit trickier than self-gratification of like the taste of a nice biscuit, to I don't know, brick by brick building a house or something like that, or getting through the paperwork so you can start your own business and those kind of things. And then once you're pushed onto some kind of momentum which drives you forward and forwards, then you will have a compulsive engagement with rewarding stimuli to something that benefits everybody and yourself. Once you have that, then obviously society will reward you with plenty of goods because of that. But obviously you do need to just have still correct things around you, like you need good friends around you to ensure that you're not going too far off the tracks. So yeah, so you can reapply that addictive quality and push it forward. Now, yeah, just covering one other subject is the media portrayal of addiction, which is really sometimes a little bit crazy, because you get these videos where people are just saying one more hit, and it's all this shocking thing which occurs and all that kind of stuff. But sometimes they just don't really sort of kick into what addiction is and all those kind of things, and what creates addiction in the first place. It's one of those things which is trying to it's a prevention sort of mechanism rather than the cure mechanism. And a lot of studies have come out to support this fact that the ones that sort of really hit themselves very hard on drugs are usually the ones that have lived in the sort of the most abusive households. And really all they're trying to do is trying to normalize and rebalance and make themselves feel comfortable a little bit again, rather than keeping their heads back into a very disorientating sort of environment. There's one explanation once I heard where it was a really good explanation where, especially when it comes to something like heroin, which does sort of give you sort of that warm feeling of being in sort of an ocean of oneness, is what some people that lived in sort of horrible, chaotic, abusive households just strive to maintain, which is just a feeling of belonging, feeling of friends, and all those kind of things. And all they want to do is just sort of retract back to those steps, and the power, like the pain of being themselves, is what is killing them, and they just need to sort of just get back into that zone of just oneness again. So yeah, again, so the only way that that's going to ever be achieved is if you have sort of good circles of good close friends, and if you go to talk to them about those things, and if you can sort of understand and sort of work out why these things have occurred and how to sort of reaugment your brain just to sort of to rewire itself, basically. I have heard as well on the news, I can't remember exactly what the drugs are, but there are certain drugs out there which certain substances, I can't remember exactly what they are. They're probably some South American sort of can't think if this is right, ayahuasca, maybe something else. But there's certain drugs that you can take which literally removes all addictive personalities, and the addiction part of the brain is sort of is rewired back to itself again, and you get a sense of realization of what is addictive and stuff. And one of the super sort of addictions which people realize that they used to have but no longer sort of have is the addiction to sugar. How incredible that was in the past, and now that has since been removed. Yeah, I was reading a book the other day about Tesla as well, and obviously what Tesla managed to achieve in it, like his spate of time, where he was like this incredible inventor. He did actually mention that it does sound like, okay, where's your life? What are you doing? Not really going on that much, but obviously what he achieved, he basically said one of the first things that I needed to learn is just to manage my addictions and to sort of keep them into such a level that I cannot I don't find any impulses there as well, because it's too much of a distraction, and then I can sort of pursue my inventions. So yeah, bear that in mind. There's something to behold with that addiction. If you can sort of use it as a force of good and use it in the pursuit of something, then you've won the game of life. But I think, unfortunately, there's too many of us out there which have got this inner demon which they're continuously fighting against. Is going back and forth with in a continuation of a losing battle. It's always interesting, the sort of the dynamic as well is where you have like a child in a family which has been caught up in addictive substances, and parents are just trying to manage that, and that person has sort of, as time progresses, the person has sort of stripped out any of their sort of their good qualities, their decencies, their morality, all of those things, their kindness, and they have just been sort of a creature just to attain that drug again. So they will more than happily steal, lie, and do anything to their own family just to ensure that they can sustain their addiction, which is a very interesting dynamic, because you just the pure element of just going against your family and all those kind of things is unbelievable. And to let a drug rewire your brain that all that counts is that there's even like the circumstance where girls have children and they have to give up their children and all that kind of stuff, and they give birth to children that have already got the addiction because they're taking the drug themselves. Unbelievable sort of extent to which people will push themselves to a level of an addiction and never sort of return until the demon grips them to such a hole that it goes too far one day. Or they're obviously surrounding themselves in illegal drugs which are not managed or not adjudicated or not safety tested, that they put themselves in incredible danger. Now, obviously, I find it very interesting how governments they never say addiction. They always say drugs. They always want to look at sort of the gun. So you look at the gun, but you're not looking at the aggressor. You're looking at the drugs. You have to look at this different objects, but you're not looking at the addiction. The government always has to look at something tangible rather than the thought. Because if it's going to the thought, I think the government just sort of starts to lose its power. The only thing that the government would like to use when it comes to the thought is obviously trumping up its own sense of nationalism and we are one and all those kind of things for its own means. But when we talk about people and people problems, we'd like to pursue the objects, but not necessarily pursue the actual emotions and the drivers which create them in the first place. I think one of the things where people always say is that you look at causations and effects, and there's multiple reasons why things are happening in the first place. But when you get sort of the government and its war on drugs and all those kind of things, they pursue that thing to that extent. But it doesn't really seem to have any sort of statistical backing as to whether they've achieved anything in the realms of improving life and quality. And the pursuit of like restricting drugs to an extent that no person can attain them anymore just never materializes. It seems like almost the opposite can be the fact. So, addiction always wins out in that sense, because because you're just trying to mask the causes of what is happening there, rather than trying to center in on why addiction is happening in the first place. Why is this compulsion to addictive substances is happening? And obviously, the problem is that when you start talking, this is obviously drug classification is interesting in itself. Once you're talking about addiction, then you have to talk about addiction to pornography or sexual desire and food, and then it becomes very real to everybody, and they say, okay, well, this addiction thing isn't necessarily just the drugs itself. It's encompassing, and it's in everything that we do. So we have the war on drugs, which just seems to continuously fail. And there's vested interest by governments to obviously pursue the war on drugs. Not necessarily the entire government, but certain areas of the government which would want to continue the war on drugs. The police force would obviously like to pursue the war on drugs. It's the easiest one that the easiest war that they can they continue. They need humongous amounts of manpower. Relatively, a drug dealer is obviously just a buyer and seller. I mean, obviously there may be a criminal element behind him, but to arrest a drug pusher is relatively simple compared to a violent person on the street. And then there's a lot of questions surrounding the fact that if you do start arresting these people which are surrounded by the drug war, then you're taking people off the street, maybe fathers, maybe mothers. You're taking off, you're breaking up family homes. There's multiple sort of areas which can kick in and have an adverse effect. And in essence, push forward the drive for addiction in the populace as a whole. So it turns into its vicious cycle. I do question though that. So like, I guess there's a big realization now that the war on drugs is not winnable. But it's how long has it been taking now? I guess we had a humongous war on alcohol in the 1920s in America. And everyone knows that it became underground. It made the mafia richer and richer and richer. It pushed everybody to drinking in these little cellar bars and stuff like that. It went on, and if anything, when you make something that's an addictive thing like drugs underground, then you actually, when you make something unattainable, you make it more attractive. So you always want the girl that you can't get and all those kind of things. It becomes more desirable to you. So there's these factors which come into account. I guess there is, putting it onto the government side, I mean, obviously you don't want necessarily like to walk into a sweet shop full of every drug that you can possibly know, and then just take your certain drugs for the weekend and then off you go again. I think if you had drugs that freely available, then there is the possibility that you would have had somebody living a life where they couldn't attain certain drugs, and now they can. So where they were just a smoker and now they're a habitual cocaine sniffer or something like that. And then I guess some certain things about addiction as well is that you do get a lot of people in this world who take drugs and don't necessarily spiral out of control, lose their jobs, their wives, the kids, everything else, and live homeless until they overdose themselves or anything like that. You do get, well, I would say we're talking in the very high 90%. The majority of people maintaining certain levels of addiction and keeping a job and being fairly competent in their job that they do. And the addiction doesn't necessarily affect their ability to do the work. Now, there obviously are some certain drugs that do that, but they still can sort of maintain their work. Now, okay, like the simple one would be obviously the fat person at work can obviously manage doing their work and still eating a load of biscuits. Now, they're probably not going to reach too many years past 60, but they still can be very highly productive in their work and that realm and maintain an addiction. So, from a government's perspective, if you can get people to if people take drugs, it's fantastic that you can take revenue from that fact. So it's actually it's another realm where you can extract wealth from people, and they can still produce GDP for the country. So certain drugs are not necessarily totally off the radar. Now, I think there's certain things where, say, if you're taking a lot of those the hippie drugs like hallucinogens and LSDs, I don't think you're going to be that very productive. And it's very interesting how, even though at low levels and stuff like that, magic mushrooms and things aren't necessarily very harmful to you, but governments usually make that the highest level of sort of a dangerous drug, and you're not allowed to take those and stuff like that, which is it's very interesting because there's I think there's certain areas of points where people can sort of adjudicate where a drug is good or bad. The first level would be, I would say, obviously, this is the most important area for anybody who's taking a drug. Does it give a impulsive sort of reaction to violence, or like makes people impulsively violent? That's obviously one of the most dangerous things that somebody can do is in taking that drug, or at least neglectful. So if you've taken that drug, now you jump into a car and you're off on that drug and you're driving around and you're driving in a high-speed projectile which can crash into anybody at any time and killing them. Now, I think if you've worked out what I'm talking about here, we're talking about alcohol. Probably one of the most, for everybody else, one of the most dangerous drugs you could possibly take, because it gives people a little heightened sense of confidence. It sort of, it's a depressant, and it sort of lowers people's reaction time, skills, things like that. And it's very dangerous because that heightened level of confidence, you go down to a bar, somebody you think or you perceive has talked to you in the wrong way, then you start a fight, then anything can happen at that stage. You've got this little heightened confidence. You drove your car down to the pub, just think you was going to stay for a couple, but then you drank another 8 drinks, and now you've got this heightened confidence. All right, lads, let's jump in the car. We'll do this now. And you potentially could murder somebody that night, or manslaughter somebody that night. So really, you could massively look at alcohol as one of the sort of leading targets of something that can be the most violent drug out there. As for its ability to hamper production, I think it does have certain levels of it diminishes the brain's capacity. If you're out drinking every night, there's no way that you're going to be able to. It disrupts your sleep quite badly. You can have awful hangovers, and the next morning, there's no way that you're going to be able to produce. If you've had a good skinful of beer, you're going to be able to produce even sort of a third of what you would normally if you was sober and on the coffees. So that's another interesting factor, because if we were rewriting the rule books of what is a dangerous drug on the populace, I think alcohol would be well up there. Now, it's interesting how alcohol has sort of maintained its sort of grip. I think it was one of the earliest drugs that we've sort of been able to master, and I guess there is something kicking into the fact that we go out on the weekend. There's lots of stories. I guess we got the social element of drinking with our friends, the laughs, the laughters, and then that little confidence boost that we get from chatting up the opposite sex, and obviously all those little elements ingrained into us that we keep alcohol in place. I think obviously if America's in the 1920s wanted to get rid of it, I guess there definitely is something to the government probably might want to get rid of it again, but it's very interesting how that's stuck around, because it does throw up the largest amount of questions against the war on drugs. Now, when it comes to harmful for our bodies and on that kind of stuff, if we're looking from a health perspective, then you got to look straight away at smoking. Smoking just has a horrible effect on the lung capacity, your stamina. It's a humongous diminishing of one's health. If you take ability, if you remove the ability that somebody can absorb oxygen, and that's massively diminished, then you have you can't walk up the stairs, all those kind of things, and eventually it's there's a good chance that it becomes cancerous as well. So it's a highly harmful to our health drug, yet it's readily available. It doesn't, on the other hand, affect our ability to work. If anything, it's actually sort of improves our ability to work. So, yeah, smoking is one of those things where you can say that, I guess the government, there's been big drives now where the government's sort of taken that one out of the equation, where they've banned it from smoking in certain areas, and I think that it is moving in the correct direction, where like it's I think the government, this is a good call for the government in this sense. The government's almost sort of ridden it from sort of society, and especially in the Western worlds and stuff like that, and I guess that's commendable. Maybe sometimes people were just going to jump onto other things. I think there's there's another little factor of like electronic cigarettes. People say that the news is still out there of whether it's harmful or not to you, but like where cigarette companies are just throwing in loads of different chemicals into a cigarette, you've now got just the pure nicotine in a vapor sort of thing. So that is getting that ideal wiped out. I've seen actually people smoke in offices with vapor pens. That's quite funny as well, seeing that coming back. Yeah, so all of those kind of things are kicking in. Now, going back to like the government study again, we're looking at, they should be looking at the harm, and the harm that's something that can be created, something on a social level, something on their work capacity that can happen, and the harm to oneself as well. And then sort of getting a weighted average of sort of those three elements and applying it as to the degree of sort of harmfulness that can occur, and legitimately sort of putting it into that realm. Now, the problem you have with that balance is that if you have alcohol, which is sticking out there, and you have cigarettes, which is sticking out there, you've got to categorize all these other drugs around the same level as those two, and you're going to be basically releasing majority of the drugs out there, which is very funny. I guess like one of the funny, interesting ones is marijuana. Whereas marijuana is, I guess it does hamper your productivity. If you smoke it, you do become a little bit lazy. It does sort of affect one's capacity to not to think, but just to be highly productive in a working environment, being very sort of accurate, and being very sort of quick thinking and all those kind of things. I guess you can quick think in a in the level of how you what was the thing? You can be very quick thinking in the terms of just how your brain sort of goes around and thinks about different crazy things, all that kind of stuff. But it doesn't give you that focus that you need when you're usually in a working environment. But one thing that is to say is that you're not going to get a load of smoking hippies kicking off in a big fight anytime soon. So for the violent aspect of things, it's just not going to happen. You're never going to see. You're never going to see it really. Come to think about it, actually, I did remember thinking once that there used to be sort of maybe Zulu tribes that used to smoke it before like wars and stuff like that, and it would get them to focus and get them sort of tuned in to battle and stuff like that. So maybe I could stand correct, but maybe there's other elements involved in that where you have to sort of chant and keep on sort of going over sort of how angered you are against the opposition and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, there's marijuana isn't really going to cause many problems for the police. I guess it's a bit stinky and it smells a bit, but doesn't really sort of upset many other people. So I would put that one straight on the radar of drugs that you could legitimately legalize. But yeah, beyond that, the government needs to have a little rethink on a global level. I'm going to conclude that for my show today. I can really go into drugs a lot further. I really wanted to just sort of cover the addiction side of things. It's been a pleasure as always, and we'll catch up again tomorrow. Thank you very much.